Hello, listeners. On this beautiful April 21st, 2025, we bring you a new episode of The Path to Calm. Stop overthinking, become present, find peace. Today's featured book is Stop Negative Thinking: How to Control Your Thoughts, Stop Overthinking, and Transform Your Mental Habits. Today's episode is entitled Unleashing the Power of Positive Change. Are you ready to take control of those pesky negative thoughts? In this episode, we're diving into some powerful tools to rewrite those thought patterns once and for all. We'll explore the ABCDE method, which is like having a secret code to unlock a happier mindset. It's time to journal our way to new beliefs and discover if they align with our values. Get ready to challenge those thoughts and take actions toward a brighter outlook.
We've explored the idea of reframing thoughts and began to identify cognitive distortions as well as gently challenge them as they emerge. It's important that we have these fundamental paradigm shifts in place first. Otherwise, we'll merely be working within our negative mindset, not working on our negative mindset. As Einstein famously said, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. In this chapter, we'll look more closely at a concrete technique for slowing right down and rewriting the very programming that our negative thinking runs on. But first, let's look at the insights gathered by the founder of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, Albert Ellis. In his work, he couldn't help but notice that different people seem to respond very differently to similar events. Why? The events themselves didn't explain the difference. It must be the thoughts, feelings, and beliefs of the people who were interpreting these events. Over the years, Ellis came to the same conclusions that Shakespeare arguably did in Hamlet when he said, "There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." Thoughts, feelings, and actions are all connected and work together to create your response to external events. The ABC method, inspired by this understanding, helps us tease apart the different elements. A is for activating event. This is neutral in the sense that it only takes on meaning and value according to our response to it. B is for beliefs, how we respond internally to the event. C is for consequence. Importantly, the outcome or consequence is not a direct result of the event, but of our interpretation of the event. The event is always neutral. You can see where this is going. If we want to change our lives, we shouldn't start with A, the external events, but B, how we think about the events these events come from. In CBT, the goal is to make adaptive changes, so 2 new letters are added. D is for disputation. This is where we challenge the ideas in B. E is for new effect, something different to replace the old C. Let's look at an example. Dan has always loved motorcycles and owns several. One fateful day, he's out riding at night and has an accident. He collides with a car, severely injuring the mother and daughter inside, totaling his favorite bike, and leaving him with spinal damage that means that he'll not ride a bike again for years, if ever. That's one big, gnarly activating event. Believe it or not, Ellis would say that this event, tragic as it appears, is neutral and has no meaning by itself. But Dan is right there and responding instantly. He's completely destroyed with guilt and remorse. He calls it a tragedy. His world is so shaken by the event that he considers it a pivotal moment. Before the accident, he was happy, carefree, and innocent. After it, he was a condemned man, miserable, doomed to carry the remorse of the damage he'd caused, not to mention the physical pain from his own significant injuries. Dan refuses to forgive himself. Despite being forgiven by the mother and the daughter in the car, And despite everyone around him telling him that it was an accident and not his fault, Dan is eaten up with the shame and the deep wish to turn back time. He falls into a depression and, perhaps unconsciously, starts to punish himself. He withdraws socially and stops taking care of himself. A pattern of self-defeating, negative thinking seeps into his world. Here's how the ABC method applies to Dan. A. The activating event is the accident. B. There are many beliefs here, but the big one is, I am guilty. I'm a bad, bad person. C. The consequences are obvious. Dan spirals into depression and self-loathing, unable to forgive himself or move on. Now, the ABC part of the model is a roadmap to help explain the relationship between thoughts, feelings, and behavior. But it's only when Dan seeks therapy with a CBT psychologist that he is asked to add on the other two letters and work through this dynamic so it can be transformed. Filled with grief and distress, Dan enters therapy and wants to talk about the details of the gruesome accident. The therapist listens, but he's not interested so much in the details of the story as he is in the meaning underneath them. He listens for the beliefs that inform the way Dan talks about his experience. Dan uses plenty of cognitive distortions, catastrophizing, should statements, and a heaping dose of personalization. But the therapist doesn't engage with these. Instead, he becomes curious about the core beliefs that these distortions are serving. They work together, and Dan becomes aware of the story he's telling himself about the event. Simply realizing he is telling a story in the first place allows him to gain some distance and perspective. More on this in the next section. The therapist starts to gently challenge Dan. Is there possibly a different way of looking at the whole thing? Seeing clearly how the current story is damaging his life, Dan agrees he has nothing to lose and that he'll try out a different perspective. It was a sad and regrettable accident, but I didn't do it on purpose. It's true that I am responsible for the pain caused, but I never intended to hurt anyone, and that means I'm not a bad person, but just a person who made a mistake. Carrying shame and guilt doesn't serve anyone, including me. It's okay that I've found this difficult, but I can also give myself permission to move on now and live my life again. So, is that the right story? Maybe. Dan could also tell another one. The day of the accident was the worst day of my life, but despite all the pain, I am grateful it happened because it taught me something precious, to never take anything for granted, to live while I can, and to appreciate every moment I have. That means going out there and living life in the best way I possibly can so that when it's my time to die, I know I've lived well and will not be filled with regret. Completely different story. In fact, there are probably an infinite number of stories to tell about this event. None of them are right or wrong. However, all of them will lead to particular consequences. Are those consequences in line with a happy, healthy life that we want to create for ourselves? That's how we tell if a story is one we want to adopt. Often, CBT is simply presented as a way to make simple and superficial tweaks to single sentences. For example, instead of saying, "This is hard, I can't do it," you say, "This is challenging, but I'll try my best." Make no mistake, this sort of alteration is incredibly helpful. It's just that in real life, you've probably noticed that your problems tend to take the form of stories rather than simple, discrete statements. You can use the principles of CBT in your own life. By using a thought journal, you can carefully work through the three elements, event, belief, and consequence, and start to replace destructive or unhelpful beliefs with better ones. Before we look at that, though, here's a note on what better looks like when it comes to thoughts. No, they don't have to be relentlessly positive, but a good replacement will be accurate. It's a close reflection of external reality. Helpful. It actually assists you in achieving what you want in your life. Congruent. It aligns with who you are and the values and principles you hold dear. It goes without saying, but the thoughts you use to replace unhelpful ones shouldn't be simply copied and pasted from someone else's life. They have to genuinely mean something to you. Being your own CBD therapist is a little like applying the find and replace function on Microsoft Word. There are two parts. First, observe and identify your thoughts. Second, rewrite those beliefs and allow the change in perception to filter through to your actions and behaviors in the external world. Then, take note of the results, adjust, and repeat. Step 1. How to keep a thought journal. This is not a conventional journal in the sense that you simply sit down and write whatever comes to you. While doing so has some therapeutic value, you'll want to be a little more focused and deliberate when keeping a thought journal. You're trying to understand, what are the main events that have occurred in my life? What are the beliefs I hold about these events? What are the emotions that result from thinking this way? How do I act and behave because I hold this belief? A thought journal can be used in a non-directed way if you merely want to gain some self-knowledge, but it's best used when there's a particular problem you're working through. Sit down when you won't be disturbed and give yourself 5 or 10 minutes to just explore how you think and feel. Put it all down on paper. It doesn't have to be perfect or make sense. Hold it all loosely. Don't try to interpret anything just yet. After the time is up, you may choose to take a little break before looking at it again. When you look again, you may notice some patterns and themes emerging. Maybe you go back through the text and pull these out with a highlighter. Or maybe you allow the main ideas and thoughts to coalesce into a few sentences. You'll probably notice a few cognitive distortions in the mix. As you're writing or rereading, don't try to avoid painful or uncomfortable themes. In fact, lean into those, as they will most reliably lead you to your core beliefs about the event that's underway. Try also to avoid making any pronouncements just yet. Don't let that inner critic weigh in with judgments and diagnoses. Give yourself permission just to honestly express everything. Yes, even that thing you're trying hard not to think about. Step 2, rethink and redo. Once you've identified the key thought patterns and core beliefs hiding inside your current situation, it's time to get curious about alternative ways of looking at things. Once you've done that, then the next step becomes obvious too. You think of ways to implement those new beliefs via action. It might be helpful to summarize things neatly by creating a table of 2 columns. One column is the negative thought pattern you currently hold, and the other column is where you brainstorm new beliefs and interpretations. The key point about this exercise, though, is that intellectually understanding what a better alternative would look like does not mean that you instantly replace it. Chances are, your negative thought patterns have been there for a while. It'll take time to experience a genuine and lasting shift to something different, so be patient and realistic. So, writing something new in the second column is the very least you could do. You have to imagine really drilling this new way of thinking into your mind. It has to become real for you. There are many ways of doing this, but passively waiting for your mind to catch up is not likely to work. This is where action can help. Imagine that everything you write in the second column is purely hypothetical. That is, until you take action to make it real. Here are a few ideas. Take action that supplies you with evidence that supports your new belief. Your brain is intelligent. It doesn't want to believe something without proof. So, For example, if your unhelpful thought is, everyone will hate what I create, then put it to the test. In a small way, ask someone for their opinion on what you've created. When they don't hate it, make a mental note. Then take another small step. Gradually, you are accumulating evidence for your new thought. There are people who like my art. Create and strengthen a new filter. Your old mental filter worked hard to only notice those things that confirmed your core belief. Every day, pause to deliberately ask yourself to look at things in a way that aligns with your new belief. The old thought, I get depressed in winter, will give way to the new one. There are many things about winter that I still enjoy. If you try to find 5 things you love about each winter day when you wake up. Practice self-compassion. Remember that cognitive distortions are not only about content, but about feeling. You might find that your thought processes are fairly rational and realistic, but the problem is that they're just too harsh. The thought, most of my life is behind me, it may be literally true, but it's kind of unflattering. Here, taking action may simply mean being brave enough to face what's uncomfortable with humor and kindness. Well, you can't go on an epic journey without putting a few miles on the clock. Be polite and courteous to yourself. A little tact goes a long way. Try a handy trick for quickly cultivating self-acceptance. Put the words, "and I love that," at the end of something you're framing as a problem. I failed my driver's test, and I love that. It's not a magic wand, but isn't it interesting how it shifts your perspective? Maybe it's not the end of the world that you're flawed or struggling in the way you are. At least consider the possibility. Change statements to questions. Your core beliefs are just that, beliefs, not facts. If you find in the first column the thought, nobody wants to hire someone with my skills, change it to, is anyone hiring someone with my skills? Literally go and check. Sounds too simple, but we often allow assumptions to act like facts in our lives. Be curious. Don't say how the door is closed. Ask about any other doors around you that are open. In fact, while you're at it, ask about secret escape routes hidden under the floor you're standing on. Go into learning mode. A great trick is to ask yourself, how? Instead of saying, I can't do this, say, how can I do this? If something isn't working, don't focus on that fact. Ask what does work. If you have the belief, I'll always be bad with money, then combat it with a very concrete, realistic question, how can I start to improve my financial literacy? This way, you're not getting hung up on the fact of a challenge or obstacle. You're just skipping right over it and refusing to dwell, instead asking what happens next. One very powerful question to ask, no matter what you're struggling with, is, what kind of person do I have to be right now to cope with this well?
We've reached the end of another episode, and I hope you're feeling inspired to take control of your negative thoughts. Changing our thought patterns is not easy, but it's worth it. Remember, we need a fresh perspective. Thinking differently can help us solve problems in ways we've never imagined. So grab that journal and explore the ABCDE method. It's a great tool to understand your beliefs and shape new ones. Here's a quote to motivate you further. The mind is like water. When it's turbulent, it's difficult to see. But when it's still, the image of truth is clearly reflected. Let that sink in as we sign off. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay positive and keep those mental habits in check.